In the passage we just heard, in Luke chapter 9, we witness Jesus setting out for Jerusalem, fully aware of the challenges awaiting him. The passage captures the themes of commitment, sacrifice, and the high cost of following Jesus. Jesus set his face to go to Jerusalem. The phrase "set his face" signifies Jesus' unwavering determination and commitment to fulfill his divine mission. Today's reading challenges Christians to stand firm in their faith amidst many trials and drawing inspiration from Jesus. The group travelling with Jesus were his 12 disciples, including James and John, who have been with him throughout his ministry. The disciples were eager to follow Jesus and learn from him, but they also faced challenges and doubts as they journeyed with him. Although they weren't aware that the biggest challenge was yet to come when they reached Jerusalem. They had witnessed Jesus' many teachings, miracles, and exchanges with various people along the way. But at this point, they were passing through Samaria. Now, from biblical records, we know the land of Samaria occupies a unique position. It's between Judea in the south and Galilee in the north. Historically, this region matches up to the central part of what we know today as the West Bank. This was a region where the Jews and the Samaritans had a long history of animosity towards each other. Now, the surroundings that Jesus and his disciples were going through would have been typical of that region. Dusty roads, small villages, and fields of crops. But the tension between the Jews and the Samaritans adds a layer of difficulty to the journey. A warning of the rejection and misunderstandings that Jesus will face as he continues in his journey. That path that he's walking and his ultimate sacrifice in Jerusalem. As they approach a Samaritan village, they send messengers ahead to prepare for their stay. The Samaritans and the Israelites were at loggerheads. It had gone on for so long that all trust was gone. The Samaritans didn't trust Jesus to come to Samaria. They thought they would be criticised by him because they didn't worship at the temple in Jerusalem. When disagreements and fallouts go on, we can sometimes forget what actually started them. We can forget that whether right or wrong, the other party can feel hurt and wounded, or that actions and reactions can be brought about by trauma. In the rejection by the Samaritan village, we see Jesus facing refusal, which was a common experience to his followers. The rejection echoes the readings from John 1 and Matthew 10, highlighting the reality that not everyone will receive the message of Christ. The importance today lies in a gracefully handling rejection and continuing the mission without bitterness. The disciples James and John were unhappy that they weren't welcome and wanted to retaliate. Maybe they were trying to impress Jesus with their keenness for protecting his name. But Jesus was not impressed. Well, we know that retaliation usually never ends well. But, as we also know, that's not how Jesus worked. Jesus rebuked their vengeful spirit for wanting to bring down fire on the Samaritans. And his decision was simply to go to another village where he was welcome. This story could have been written for the world today, and not thousands of years ago. Fallouts and disagreements are nothing new in our world today. Every day in the news, or if we read papers or whatever, there is disagreement and there's retaliation, and then the other people retaliate. But it's not always tribe against tribe or nation against nation. It can also happen in families, and even within our faith family. It can be closer to home. Some of us have stories of families that don't talk to each other. Many years ago, strikes caused families to take sides, and the fallout was devastating. Political and religious differences can also tear families apart. There are things that happen within the family or actions outside the family that sets them apart. And it's sometimes very difficult to reconcile. But as Christians, shouldn't we find a way around them? Remember, we should always turn the other cheek, which is probably easier to say than to do. But who says anything worth having is easy to get? Jesus didn't have time for retaliation, but he was sympathetic to the village people. They were hurt and suspicious. Instead of anger, he calls for love. Instead of revenge, he calls for peace and gentleness. When others reject or scorn us, it's easy to want to retaliate and get revenge or seek our own justice. But we need to remember that judgment belongs to God. As Jesus continued his travels towards Jerusalem, there were 3 people who could have become new disciples. But they didn't meet the conditions that Jesus laid down. The first man was a scribe who volunteered to follow him when he heard, but followed him until he heard what the cost was. He had to give up his home comforts. Apparently, he was accustomed to a comfortable home. The second man was called by Jesus. What an honour to be asked. But he was also rejected because he had something to do first. He was needed to attend a parent's funeral. Now, Jesus is not suggesting here that we dishonour our parents, but only that we don't permit our love for family to weaken our love for the Lord. The third man also volunteered, but he couldn't follow Jesus because he was looking back instead of looking forward. There's nothing wrong with a fond or a loving farewell, but if it gets in the way of moving forward, then that is a problem. Even if you look at the psalm, it says, "Lift up mine eyes to the hills." You can't lift up your eyes to the hills if you're turning and looking back. Jesus saw that this man's heart was not totally with him. Instead of moving forward with Jesus, he would be too busy looking back to what he'd left. What about ourselves in this scenario? What stops us from following Jesus? What stops us from helping within the church? Some of excuses. Our excuses can be, work is crazy at the moment. Once summer is over, I'm sure I'll be able to help. Or, I don't like to interfere. There's always loads of people helping. Once I retire, I'll be able to help. I'm sure we could all come up with a great reason why we need to put it off to next week, to next month. But Jesus wants us now. Finally, the journey to Jerusalem shows us Jesus' unwavering dedication and resolve. It symbolises a path of sacrifice and obedience that he was willing to take to fulfill his purpose on earth. It also serves as a powerful reminder that true discipleship requires us to prioritise our faith above all else, even when faced with difficulties or uncertainties along the way. Jesus shows us about the importance of determination and commitment in our own lives. It prompts us to ask ourselves, are we willing to follow Jesus wholeheartedly, even if it means facing opposition or making sacrifices? How can we demonstrate a similar level of determined commitment in our own faith journey? Now to the King, eternal, immortal and invisible, the one and only God, be honour and glory forever. Amen. Let us now take a moment to reflect or take time for personal prayer as we listen to Matt.